welcome. And Lynn is out there saying hello as well.
Oh,
Nice to have you, Lynn. Thank you so much for your patience, for sticking around, and I hope everyone else comes back as well. And if not, we'll certainly. Oh, and Julia's there.
oh,
Hello,
great.
Julia. So, all right, so let's get started. Welcome, Rick, to Chronic Journeys. This is fantastic. Now I need to. I had amended the little blurb, and now I will de-amend it. So,
Well, good.
um, how are you today? Less
I'm well. How
frustrated
about you,
now.
Lena? How are you
um,
doing?
Not too bad, thanks. Not too bad. Kind of cold. I'm wearing the what is now the trademark scarf, because it's cold up here.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
it it is about 65 to 70 here. We've had uh,
Hmm.
rain for 2 days. I guess we've had um, about 2.5 inches,
Mm,
which is a substantial amount. And the weather person was saying maybe another inch by tomorrow.
yeah.
So our yards have overrun themselves.
Yeah, that seems to be just the thing these days. In May, it's pouring. We were supposed to have that kind of rain. I don't think we did. We had some, but not that much. Just right now, you're frozen. I don't know but it's a good image that you froze on. You're
Huh?
smiling, so that works. So hopefully you will unfreeze as we talk. Kathy Kramer's out there as well. So we
Hey,
got a
Kathy.
little got a group, good group going. So, tell us a bit about yourself. Kind of who are
Uh,
you, where do you live, etc.
Rick Phillips. I live in central Indiana and about 15 miles north of Indianapolis. Uh, Grew up here in central Indiana in a place called Kokomo. It is real.
Really?
Yeah. Uh, Named after an Indian chief.
Oh, okay.
And uh, it is a very real place. And however, there are no Beach Boys running around there. We like to tease that we had uh, 40 miles of pristine beach,
Yeah.
all in the planning,
Mm.
uh, planning for the day that the ocean shows up.
That's awesome. And you are. I do have your link, but tell us about where you are on the internet, where people can find you.
My website is www.radiabetes.com. Um, when I set it up, I had RA and diabetes, and so
Hmm.
that's the reason for
Hmm.
the web name. I'm so
Hmm.
sorry about the picture being froze.
You know what? At least you're here, so that's
Okay,
fabulous.
all right.
So, um, and
So
then with
I've been married. Um, Boy, I better get this right. Almost 43 years,
Mhm,
and we have two sons who are ages 40 and 38 or thereabouts.
mhm,
And I did my undergraduate work at Indiana University and my graduate work at IU, go
mhm,
Hoosiers.
mhm,
And I did my doctoral work at a place in Florida called Nova Southeastern, and I have a
mhm,
doctorate in education. My undergraduate and graduate degrees are in public administration.
mhm. Yeah, and you worked in public administration for
Yeah,
a while, didn't you?
yeah. I
Mhm,
I spent uh, 17 years in a city hall in central
mhm,
Indiana. I
mhm,
was a city development director and controller, among other things. And then
mhm,
I switched over and did schoolwork for 15 years
mhm.
before I had to stop working because of rheumatoid arthritis.
Right, right. So you've been actually living with diabetes for much longer than RA, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah. I was 17 when I was diagnosed,
Mhm.
and actually I was 16. Um, got out of the hospital on my 17th birthday,
Oh wow.
and I was diagnosed down in Disney World. So sometimes I tweet two hashtags. Um, Disney owes me a vacation and Disney gave me diabetes. They have not responded to me yet.
I wonder why.
There's a little group of us around. I found a woman in England who was diagnosed at Disney World France,
Oh,
and
really?
yeah, and a guy in New Jersey who was diagnosed at Disney World Orlando.
It's
And
going
so
around.
there's this little cadre of people around who were diagnosed with diabetes at Disney World or a
Hmm.
Disney property, and so we we are small but mighty. Well, we are small. I don't know about mighty.
Sure, you're mighty. Maybe not as mighty as the mouse, but very few people are. So you lived with diabetes for a long time, and then you got rheumatoid arthritis that you said
Yeah,
about how long ago?
uh, 20 years ago,
Hmm.
and man, what a shock! I was
Hmm.
uh, I just didn't have any idea. I mean, I knew something was wrong. Took my youngest son for a college visit down at my beloved university, go Hoosiers, and you know, I couldn't I couldn't walk around. I couldn't I couldn't go on the tour with him.
Oh wow.
It was just impossible.
Hmm.
And so I sat in the visitor center while he went on tour. And thankfully, he came back and had decided by then that he was going to attend, which I was very happy for. I mean, that's exactly what I'd hoped.
Hmm.
And uh, but I was so disappointed I couldn't go on tour with him. And then the
Hmm.
other one was my older son was in college, and he's an engineer by trade, and he bought a beautiful um, Trans Am. I mean, it was gorgeous. It was a beast, and that's exactly what we called it, the beast. Um, but he came home. He was so proud about it, and he wanted to take me for a ride. And I couldn't get in.
Oh
I mean,
wow.
I could not physically get in that car. It was just impossible.
Hmm.
And so I saw my endocrinologist and said, I think something's wrong. And um, and he ran a test and sent me over to see the rheumatologist. I was shocked,
Hmm.
absolutely shocked. Um,
What shocked you the most that you got another condition or
yeah,
that
yeah, I was shocked. Well, I was shocked that it was rheumatoid arthritis. Um, I think with diabetes, um, we come to ascribe everything to diabetes because
Mhm.
it is a daily management um, condition.
Right.
And so anything that ever happened in my life physically, I ascribed to diabetes.
Mm.
Well, um, come to find out, it really wasn't diabetes.
Yeah.
It was rheumatoid arthritis as well.
I think the same thing happened regard maybe regardless of what you
Yeah.
start out with because I had the same experience when got diagnosed with fibromyalgia,
Hmm.
where for a long time both me and my doctors kind of went, well, this is just your RA acting in a
Right.
weird way because it happens. As we know,
Hmm.
it's decades in, it can still do fun things that surprise you or not so fun things, and it took a while before we kind of went, well, maybe this is something else. And there's almost this sense of, well, if you got one serious cranky condition, and I don't know if other people out there feel this way, but there was almost some sort of belief that it inoculates you against getting something else because it's just not fair that you get all of them, right?
Yeah.
So, and speaking of, let's talk about the more the merrier because after you got diagnosed with RA, you now also have a diagnosis of ankylosing spondylitis.
Yeah. That one was less of a shock
Mm,
uh, because once you got two, then three, you might as well have
Mm,
three.
yeah.
And if you got three, you know, I keep telling my doctors I don't want to leave this world without five.
Okay.
And so, you know, thyroid's easy for a type one person with type one to get. So I
Mm.
keep telling them I'm looking for number four because I can convince my endocrinologist to give me a thyroid condition.
Okay. Well, I like the competitiveness.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Uh,
So, so let me ask you, like, so you're juggling three conditions, two of them autoimmune arthritis. So, question number one: how did you know that there was something other than RA happening?
well, the first thing, my back started hurting so badly,
Mm,
and I had had a hip replacement back in 2013, and
right.
the hip replacement started hurting so badly. So I went to the doctor who did my hip replacement, and I said, uh, you know, this hip is just, it is really hurting. And
Mm,
he examined it and he said, well, first of all, it's not your hip, it's your back. And he said, I think that you probably have ankylosing spondylitis. And I said,
right.
what? You know? And he said, yeah. He said, it's not uncommon for people with any autoimmune disease to have more than one. And
Mm,
that's when I said I wanted five.
yeah.
And
Well,
he sent me over to see a surgeon. And the surgeon
mm,
said, yes, what's going on is um, your spine is narrowing around the nerve bundle.
mhm,
And he said, what you're feeling in your hip is really a spinal, it's a spinal cord irritation um,
oh,
caused by thickening spinal bone. And he
okay.
said, what we need to do is do a procedure. I forget the name of it. It's fairly common
Mm,
for people with AS. He said, we need to go hollow that portion of your spine out and give the nerve bundle more room to move.
right.
And so we did. And he said, this will never be 100%.
Mm,
And it has never been 100%. But he said, I will give you perhaps 80% back. And that's true. He, he really did give me about 80% pain free
mhm.
back.
Well,
And
that's a lot better than not,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
And so I asked him post surgery, I said, do you think I really do have ankylosing spondylitis?
Mm,
He said, yeah. He said, without a doubt. He said, your
oh,
SI joint and um, the way this nerve bundle's treated, he said, I'm certain you have AS. So I talked to my rheumatologist about it,
mm,
and we we did the genetic marker test. I do have the marker,
mhm. Okay.
and we agreed then that we would add that
Mm,
to our list.
okay.
Um, and then as time went on, the first issue was how do you treat it?
Mm,
There are some combination drugs out there. Most of them are combination medications that are TNF inhibitors,
right.
and
And for
unfortunately,
those of you who are watching and don't know what that is, it's one of the biologic drugs for RA and other types of autoimmune disease.
so some of these drugs, Humira is one of them, but some of these drugs treat both conditions. I had either failed out of each of them or uh, in my journey to get to where I was at, which I use Rituxan today. And either I had failed out of them or um, they were TNF inhibitors. And
Right.
I'd had a really nasty run with TNF inhibitors back
Oh,
in
really?
back in 2013. I
Mm.
developed a lupus-like syndrome
Oh.
and landed me in a hospital for over a week. It was
Mhm.
bad.
Mm.
And so the rheumatologist said, I don't want to put you back on TNF inhibitors given what had previously happened.
Right.
And so the one medication that's a dual medication is Actimera, and it didn't
Mhm.
really help the RA. So we had to make a choice in 2015 about which of these to treat. Did we
Mhm.
want to treat RA or did we want to treat AS?
Mhm.
And um, since Rituxan was working well for RA, we decided to stay with Rituxan.
Right.
That that has other implications because AS also does physical damage to a person's body,
Right.
and it certainly has to mine. Um,
Right. Which would bring me to my to one of my other questions that you recently had back surgery.
yeah.
Is that out of that decision to treat RA over AS?
Well, I have kyphosis, I guess is the way to put it. Kyphosis is a condition that causes your upper torso to bend forward,
Mhm.
and it's not directly linked to AS, meaning that everybody with AS doesn't get kyphosis, but most people who have kyphosis also have AS.
Right.
So, and I kept bending forward. I mean, a
Mhm.
lot. Over the course of my life, I had lost almost 4 inches of height,
Mhm.
um, and my back was very painful. But we
Mhm.
couldn't treat the AS, which was a contributor to additional kyphosis, and
Mhm.
so we had to make a decision to have surgery for kyphosis.
Right.
And so I was straightened back up. I was
Mhm.
popped back up. I came out of surgery. My feet were hanging out of the bed. I mean,
Oh,
it
that's
had
a good
been
sign.
years. It had been
Yeah.
absolutely years since my feet had hung over the edge of the bed.
Wow.
And I came out of surgery. I was laying in the hospital bed, kind of groggy, and my feet. At first, I didn't even know what it was, and then I realized my feet were hanging out of the end of the bed, and I thought, "Oh my goodness! This bed is at least 8 foot long, and look how much height I have gained. I must have gained a foot." And then I found out that I was actually scrunched down in the bed.
No, well, yeah, well,
I was I was
temporary giants.
yeah, I was 2.5 feet away from the head of the bed. So we got that solved when somebody pointed out, and I got pulled up in bed. Uh, but uh, I did gain back 3 or 4 inches. I'll lose at least an inch of that um,
Mm.
just because of the way the spine will settle.
Right.
But more important, I really was straightened up, and
Mhm.
we don't know the end result yet. I'm still wearing a brace.
Mhm.
It's a chest brace. It's kind of like a clamshell,
Yeah.
and I still wear it whenever I'm up out of bed.
Mhm.
And I had that surgery on March 6th, and it's been a difficult recovery, more difficult than I would have wanted.
Mhm.
However, I'm making good progress, and I'm looking forward to getting to the end.
Good. 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 So, how do or do rather I should ask, do your three? You've told us a little bit about how RA and AS sort of interact. Does diabetes interact with your other conditions as well?
It does. Diabetes is when I was diagnosed with diabetes, I thought that that would be the worst outcome.
Mm.
I thought that that would be the thing that I would most worry about for the rest of my life. It's not.
Right. No.
Diabetes is a maintenance disease,
Mm.
with long term impacts. So, uh, a doctor once described to me that autoimmune diseases is like a primordial soup.
Mm.
You just toss
Good name
stuff
for it.
in,
Mm.
and you got to get over trying to attribute one thing to another.
Right.
Uh, he said it's really, you're not a patient with three diseases. You're a patient with an autoimmune condition, and that patient with this autoimmune condition is um, the autoimmune condition is expressing itself in different ways. Um,
Oh, right.
and so, specifically though, diabetes, as I said, I use Rituxan. Rituxan's got a large dose of steroid that goes
Mm.
with each infusion,
Mm.
and that large dose of steroid absolutely rocks my blood sugar. I mean,
Oh, okay. Oh, I can imagine. Yeah.
it I can get my blood sugar up even with double or triple insulin to 4 to 500,
Yeah.
and and normal is right around 100.
Wow.
Um, so you
So
know
how long does that last after your
it
infusion?
lasts about 4 days, and if you think about um, how much fatigue comes from RA or ankylosing spondylitis, it's all that fatigue added to it.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like a triple whammy.
yeah, it's like a triple whammy.
Yeah.
So I sleep a lot and moan a lot and um, do um, just treat it with very high doses of insulin. Um,
Mm.
so that's one interaction. Second interaction is that whenever inflammation is high anywhere, diabetes is difficult to control. It
Right.
becomes the um, it becomes the bellwether of
Hmm.
inflammation in my body.
Oh, okay. So it's kind
And
of like the canary in the mine.
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
you can almost tell when a flare is coming
Mm.
because I have to pour more insulin in order to keep
Oh, okay.
the blood sugar in control. And you can almost see it. You can
Yeah.
just darn near say, yeah, I know this is coming.
Okay.
Um, depending on the amount of units of
Yeah.
insulin I have to use.
All right. So just before I go on with my questions, just also want to say hello to Kathy Birch, who's out there, to Rose, to Helen, and to Susan. We have a nice group of people watching, which is awesome. Thanks for showing up, guys.
Hello, everybody.
So so, Rick, anyone who talks to you for more than just a few minutes know that your wife Cheryl is a very important part of your life. Not only is she your life partner, but she's also an essential part of your chronic illness team. So, tell us a bit about Cheryl and how you kind of work together to conquer these things.
Well, the first thing I have to say is that we met in high school, and I I was a senior, and she was a senior. Um, we met in government class,
Hmm.
and I was absolutely smitten the moment I saw her. I thought she was about the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, and um, I worked up the nerve and asked her out, and she said no. And so I worked up the nerve again and asked her out, and she said no. And so I worked up the nerve a third time and asked her out, and she said hell no. And then a year later, she broke up with the guy that she was seeing, which is why she claims she said no, but that's not really true. But a year later, she called me and asked me out, and 15 months later, we got married. Um,
Nice.
the and that was in 1976. Um, so I have always deeply admired the fact that Cheryl worked up the courage to call and ask a guy out. and
Mm. Mhm.
I've always deeply admired that about her. Uh, we did we formed the partnership when right after my sophomore year of college, and we took off on the big adventure of life. We were both ready to be adults, and I went to uh, a commuter campus for both my undergraduate and master's, and um, and then the year that I graduated in May, we had our first child in August,
Oh, nice.
and it, we still say how how young we were. You know,
Mm.
I didn't have a job, and we were having a baby, and oh my goodness, what a mess. Uh,
But it sounds like you figured it out
yeah,
along
we
the way.
did. We made it. Uh, so um, in some ways, we grew up together.
Mhm.
I was not for certain uh, right after I asked Cheryl out if right after I asked Cheryl to marry me, I was not for certain that she would be prepared for a life with chronic illness.
Mhm.
And so we had many discussions about that
Mhm.
and what it might look like, what it might be, uh, the problems and difficulties that might be present.
Mhm.
And and she agreed that she would be. And as I said, we started off on life.
Mhm.
Um, the thing about being having a life partner, Cheryl has my back every moment.
Mhm.
Um, she she helps me with doctors. She is not afraid to mix it up with me and tell me that I'm full of it. And uh,
Very, very important quality in a partner.
yeah, and she's not afraid to step in and help
Mhm.
when something needs to be done that I can't do. This
Mhm.
back surgery, you know, I came home and I was in bed um, 23 and a half hours out of each day. I couldn't even get
Mhm.
up.
Mhm.
And that meant that um, everything that got done in our house had to be done by Cheryl. And,
Right.
and that included insulin and uh, the at that time I wasn't on my pump, so
Mhm.
we were preparing doses about 6 times a day
Mhm.
for administration. And um, as you know, having um, having RA brings with it this landslide of pills
Mhm.
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And she had to run all of that, and it was just amazing that she
Mhm.
was able to step in and do that. I would not have been able to be home
Right.
without that support. There's just no way.
No, I hear you. I hear you.
And that's the way she has helped me every minute of every day. And I need not have been concerned that she couldn't handle chronic disease,
Mhm.
a life with chronic disease. I should have been concerned. Um, I tell her I should have been concerned for myself
Mhm.
because uh, she once she's like a dog after a bone.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Mm.
sometimes she can be like a dog after a bone.
Well, it works. So,
Yeah.
other than leaning on Cheryl, who obviously is awesome, how do you cope with these multiple? And say it sounds like you got good doctors, you're on certain medications, you have surgery if you need to, but how do you cope emotionally and mentally with this?
Well, um, for most of my life, I didn't cope very well. I was in very high pressure jobs.
Mhm.
I was climbing the the ladder of two or
Mhm.
three organizations, having setbacks and successes, and my work was really occupied front and center in my job.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
in 2000, gotta think here, in 2008, my employer came to me and said, you know, this isn't working. You need to you need to find a different path.
Mhm.
And I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. I mean, it was as if somebody had taken me out back and whipped me, taken everything
Mhm.
away from me.
Yeah.
I was destroyed,
Mhm.
and I had to come home and tell Cheryl, you know, I've got to find either I've got to find a new job or I've got to do something else.
Mhm.
Well, thankfully, I spoke with my doctor, and he said he understood, and he thought that disability was something that we should try.
Okay.
I had we had certainly planned for our future, future of me not working. It took almost 2 years to get through the process, but we
Right.
did. And and once I stopped working completely, I I was so despondent,
Mhm.
and so I went back to school. I got my doctorate after I stopped working, um, realizing that I would never use it when I obtained it.
Right.
Um, so I did that, and and then when I got done in 2013 with my doctorate, um, I was despondent again. I didn't know what to do, and I thought I think I'll start writing and see what happens. And so I started writing in the diabetes community, and I
Mhm.
pledged to write uh, 4 blogs a week for a year, and I
Mhm.
did. Um, some of them were good, some of them were funny, some of them were terrible.
Mhm.
Um, but I did. And that started me off blogging. The second year, I did less blogs. I did about 80 that year, and then
Mhm.
the third year, I started RA diabetes and went out on my own, away from uh, TU diabetes,
Right.
and that allowed me uh, uh, more latitude to write about
Mhm.
things that were impacting me in the RA space.
Right.
So today I write mostly for Health Union. I write
Mhm.
on two of their sites, uh, ankylosing and rheumatoid I usually appear there on each of those sites about once a month. I participate in the diabetes community over on to diabetes.net.
Mhm.
And I was able to parlay um, my past experiences into doing some work with the National Arthritis Foundation, where I serve on the patient advisory committee for the national program,
Right.
national organization.
Mhm.
And I also serve on the patient advisory committee for the FDA.
Mhm.
And
So you're a busy guy.
yeah,
And on top of that, you're also founder of RA Blog Week, which is an annual festival that's been running for the last, what, 5 years? This is
yeah,
year number
uh,
five or
yeah.
six. So what was the idea with that?
Well, it was really the diabetes community. In the diabetes community, D-Blog Week was one of the things that we most look forward to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the diabetes community has about 300 um, bloggers that write occasionally,
Mm-hmm.
and D-Blog Week would generate 100 to 110 bloggers participating
Wow.
each year.
Mm-hmm.
And we so look forward to it. And so I thought, I wonder if something like that could work in the arthritis community.
Right.
And uh, I started RA Blog Week, and we had, I think at the height of it, we had 115 blogs posted.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
Last year we had, I think it was 78 blogs posted in a
That's
week.
good.
So
Hmm.
we're going to take a break from it. Um, I'm not
Okay.
going to do it this year, but we might get back to it.
Hmm.
I'd like to have a more broad base
Yeah.
um, um, arthritis community type blog
Hmm.
blog event. The thing about um, and the impetus for doing it was really to build community among among our community. D
Hmm.
Blog Week spawned all kinds of um, associations where we we saw Twitter chats and
Right.
movements for patient rights and that sort of thing
Uh-huh.
that came out of the associations that were formed in D Blog Week. And I was hoping to have the same kind of thing for RA Blog Week.
Mhm.
Um, Again, we are small. We're a much smaller group, but just as mighty.
Yeah. So a couple more questions. Just one question from people watching. Kathy, not Kramer, but Kathy Birch, is asking if we can ask you about accessibility build standards in Indiana. Do you know anything about those build standards and
I
whether
do.
they're sufficient? Well,
Uh,
you would having worked in development.
yeah, the standards are sufficient. The implementation may not be in all cases. Um, the standards are pretty good. Um, there are some exceptions, um, but by and large, um, you know, this country, the U.S. went from a radically different situation prior to 1982 or three, when ADA was passed by Congress. Um, you know, we basically were designing buildings and infrastructure without accessibility built into them. And overnight, um, the federal government mandated that we um, both design accessibility into our buildings and our public works projects, and that we retrofit and retrofit where possible. Now, there are times when you can't retrofit. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
Um, I worked in a city hall that was built in 1892,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
and there was no way that we could retrofit the entire thing.
Mhm.
It wouldn't support an elevator, for instance. The place was built on 3 floors, and
Yeah.
it was just impossible. Though we spent a lot of engineering money trying to figure it out. Um,
Mhm.
but on the other hand, I worked in a school corporation at a school that was built in 1923, and I got that completely retrofitted with elevators and ramps, and there was um, accessible doors,
Mhm.
and every part of that school became accessible, even better in some cases than new construction.
So
So
what you when you talk about the implementation as kind of the hiccup, what is the main obstacle to implementing the Americans with Disabilities Act?
stupidity.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
um, you know, developers, builders, public works projects, and public buildings uh, just really don't know sometimes what the standards are. So that's stupid in one way.
Yeah.
But the real stupidity is not wishing to include them. Um, you know,
Right.
y you cannot make this art. You cannot make the argument in this day and age that, in this country at least, you can't make the argument that it's not financially feasible to include um, uh, accessible building standards in a new building. You just
Well,
can't.
and it is far less expensive to include them from the get go than
Right.
to have to retrofit. So the ADA standards, are they optional then? Can you is that what people are? Is that what kind of the hiccup is that they're there, but there's
No,
no kind of?
no, they are not optional. They are
Didn't think so.
required,
Mm,
except in uh, very narrow
right.
um, areas.
Circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah, um, but um, the primary enforcement is litigation, and
Right.
we do have folks who will who do litigate those standards when they feel aggrieved, and
Mm,
they almost always win.
yeah.
And um, and it's not difficult to litigate. Um, it's
Mm,
it's it's just stupid not to include them. It really is. It's just dumb.
wholeheartedly agree. Okay, so just wrapping up on the last thing, in addition to all your advocacy and your writing, you're also a motivational speaker. Tell us more about that.
Well, I don't know that I get to motivate very much, but I do really like to speak, and um, I have done so at two or three different places. And I had a
Mhm.
really nice presentation in Korea this past December um,
Oh.
at the World Diabetes Federation biannual event.
Hmm.
Um, I've had really nice poster presentation at
Hmm.
the ACR 2 years
Right.
ago. And what I like to say about motivation is that I really come to them from a point of being so low after I lost my job, being so depressed
Hmm.
that um, whatever they see today should just be viewed as a man who was able to rediscover himself, not because he wanted to,
Yeah.
but because he was allowed to. You know,
Nice. I
it,
like that.
in a lot of ways, my life began to change when I was diagnosed with RA. My mom was a type 1 person with type 1, and she lived until she was 48 years old
Hmm.
um, and before she succumbed to the complications of type 1,
Hmm.
and about 24 years post diagnosis. And when I got RA, I, I looked at that and I thought, here I am. I, I, I've had diabetes for 25 or 26 years.
Hmm.
I'm in pretty good health. And you know what? My mom never had the chance to have a second autoimmune disease.
Hmm. Hmm.
She never, she didn't live long enough to have a second diagnosis.
Right.
And it's not, RA was not something I wanted. Nobody wants this.
No.
But if you think about it, the alternative to being having blindness and kidney failure and infections because of foot sores,
Hmm.
um, gastroparesis, the alternative to that is if the alternative to that is rheumatoid arthritis, uh, which has treatments today,
Hmm.
then I'm not doing too damn bad. And
Yeah.
and you know, I have to look at it that way. I really do.
Hmm. Yeah,
I
I agreed.
and
Agreed.
I and I think how fortunate am I? You know, I
Hmm.
can't be depressed
Good point.
because I've seen the alternative,
Yeah.
and Um, yep,
Yeah,
my
no,
mom
it's a that's a wonderful way to look at it,
my
and
mom
it's
was uh, my mom was a control subject in insulin pump studies back in '72. Um,
oh, really.
and today I wear an insulin pump on my belt. In those days, the insulin pump was the size of a cart, and you wheeled it around the hospital.
Oh,
Um, and today I wear an insulin pump on my belt, and whenever I look at that, I think of my mom, who did not live long enough to have an insulin pump,
mm,
who missed many of the modern innovations.
yeah,
But when I look at that pump every day, I see my mom, and I think,
yeah.
how lucky am I? And I am a
Mm.
fortunate human being.
I think that's a fantastic way to look at it. Thank you so much for talking to me. I'm so glad that we managed to solve the technical issues.
Sorry about the
And
camera freeze.
yeah, well, like I think it was Julie that said you froze in the perfect headshot. So there are worse things, right? Thank you
So
so much, Rick,
to
and thank
everybody
you.
who's listening or looking in, I hope you have a wonderful day. Um,
Absolutely,
and
and
reach out to me anytime. You can catch me at um, www.radiabetes.com, or you can drop me a note at info@radiabetes.com.
that's fantastic. I have left the URL for your website in the comments. And if you're watching this after we were live, by all means, leave a comment and I'll be coming back and circling back and chatting. Thank you for your patience today in waiting for us to arrive and for watching. And next week, I know that I've been doing this mostly on Mondays. I may be shifting it next week because I know it's a holiday in the States. So I'll keep you posted on that later on this week on who's who's arriving to join Chronic Journeys chat, and I will see you then. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Rick.
Have a great day, Lena.
Thank you. Bye bye.